Welcome back. It is still the run-up, and we've just been joined by our first guest. He is a financial analyst and convener at Chiwuike Uba Foundation. Good morning and welcome, Dr. Chiwuike.
Good morning, Uche.
All right, so we're looking at the budget planned out for the 2023 general elections. It has continued to increase from what we had in 2001 to what we had in 2002, and finally an additional 50 billion naira has been added to the 305 billion naira that we had for 2002, making it 355 billion naira. How do you react to this new development?
Well, I think the new budget is a reflection of the current situation in the country. I'm not ignorant that the new budget is also in response to the inflationary pressure on currency, which makes its purchasing power lower. Remember that also that the prices of things, generally has increased, and most of the things that they will need also, they will also import, and that also, increases the cost of the election. Secondly, also, the insecurity that has engulfed almost every part of the country, the demands that they will need extra measures, which may include technology and people and all that, and that also cost centers as well. However, the big question is that how do we get the funds to do this? And I'll leave that to the next.
Okay, I was going to throw that as a question to you, because I mean it's not news that during the budget presentation it was made public that the 2023 budget is on deficit. So if we're having these billions mentioned for something as important as the 2023 general elections, I mean you can't take that away. It is very important. But how will these funds come about? Even though you've made it clear that you would rather leave that question for, the professionals or people in charge. But then you are a financial analyst, and I'm sure you're very conversant with what the budget looks like for 2023. How do you think this is going to affect the economy with the way it already is?
Well, I think the first thing first, I'm funding the electoral budgets is a function of sectoral prioritization, and given the importance of the 2023 election, among others, I will believe that the government of the day will prioritize spending on elections. So, having said that, what will happen is that there are a lot of other consumptive expenditures or consumption-based expenditures that may be put on hold. If you look at the 2023 budget, you will discover there are a lot of frivolities that we have seen in previous budgets. So I will expect that the government will deal with the issue of elections and find a way to cut wastages and other non-essential expenditures. But beyond that also, I will expect the National Assembly to take a closer look at the budget has been submitted by the electoral umpire, the INEC, to see areas that cost can be saved and if the budget can be reduced further. Because I don't think the budget will be passed as presented by National Assembly. But in terms of funding, as I said earlier on, it will be funded either through the revenue or also the money they have projected to borrow. But I think that expenses is part of the first line items, given the priority that will be given to 2023 election.
Yeah, Dr. Chiwuike, thank you for your perspective. I was just wondering, have we really exhausted determining other ways of conducting elections at a cheaper cost? For example, there's going to be electronic voting and a few of other things. But in your opinion, do you think there are other patterns that this election could be conducted with that will bring down the cost?
Yes, I'm sure you just mentioned one, part of which is electronic voting, where we can vote from our homes without even going as every electorate has a VIN, which is voters identification number, which has also been linked to our NIN. So it's important also that we begin to consider that if that happens, government will save millions of or billions of naira that would have been expended, in employing ad hoc staff and all that. That's one aspect. The second aspect is for those of them that are in rural areas without access to internet and all that. We can also use community-based approaches. The same way they hold community meetings where you send somebody that goes there, and they can use the initial option A4 that we used in the during the 1993 election, and that will happen. So when we deploy these things, and also we can have early voting like they do in the US, where you can mail through post, even though our postal service is almost dead, it's comatose. But I know in every local government they have post office and all that. So if they can coordinate it and send it, use postal mail, that can also be a cost saving measure. So there are a lot of other options that can be employed outside electronic voting, as I've mentioned.
Mentioned,
Just
okay.
thinking on my feet
Okay,
also.
I want to still follow up on that question because it's still the same issue now that I want your perspective on. At the end of elections, the Independent National Electoral Commission provides a certain amount of money to the political parties. Some amount of money is given to them. I think it's usually based on their performance. I'm not particularly clear regarding the criteria. But I was wondering, should this amount of money be paid, especially when one considers the fact that the political parties would have tasked members to contribute so much? I mean, we knew parties that were selling forms, presidential election forms for 100 million naira, for instance. If these parties have found a way to mobilize funding to finance their campaigns, why should INEC give them any monies back? Would you have something to say or suggestions to make regarding this? And wouldn't this reduce the cost of elections?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think the 2022 Electoral Act, has removed that component where the government funds political parties.
Okay.
But peradventure that is still there. I don't think that is the best thing to do. Government shouldn't be funding political parties, even though political parties are supposed to be part of the structures that enthrone good governance. And the essence of initially even bringing to bear that section of funding political parties is to make it easier for people to contest the election. But now that political parties are charging hundreds of millions for nomination forms and all that, it is not proper. Secondly, you can see that also a weakness on the electoral umpires' parts, because they are not also monitoring electoral expenditures as you should. Because if you find out, why are we going to spend billions of naira for election? That's from the political parties' point, and also candidates. This thing. When there's a law that places a ceiling to what should be spent, and these are the things that also that are increasing electoral budget or costs, not just from the government side, but also from the political parties and candidates' angle. And all this has its impact on overall economy in the end. And I think the electoral umpire, the ANEC, has a lot of work to do in that regard. But in answering your question, I don't think it's appropriate to continue funding political parties by the government.
Okay, on a personal level, Dr. Chiwuike, I think this is the highest Nigeria has ever had to spend on, elections, general elections and electioneering and all that. Do you think that with all these monies being spent and all the conversations around we're doing this because we want to have a better election process and that's why we're going electronic and all that, do you think personally that this will make for even a better elections and, for better safety of voters and people showing interest and coming out to vote for the 2023 general elections?
Personally, I don't think there's any correlation between how much fund that is expended to the quality or the success of the election. That has not been established. But like as I said earlier on, I believe that the increase in the budget on will be spending is a reflection of the current state of the economy. If you look at the inflation rate, which is about 20.77 as at last month, it does shows you also that if you look at the 2019 expenditure in rate terms, given the inflationary rate as at that time and now, you may find out that in rate terms we are not spending more money, but not nominally it may appear that we are spending more, but in rate terms we are not spending more. But beyond that, as we have earlier adduced, security issues. If you look at our budget for 2023, we budgeted over 1 trillion naira for security. The question we should ask ourselves is that the budget we have or the expenses we have always made on security, has that translated to reduction in security? That is the big question. It's not just about our next budget. So what that shows is there's something that is fundamentally wrong, in our planning and spending process and all that. And maybe we have not also begin to deal with the issues, the real issues, that are bringing about the heightened insecurity in Nigeria, in the country. So until we begin to deal with those fundamental issues, it doesn't matter how much you spend on purchasing arms and all that to combat insecurity, we may still not be able to deal with that issues. So in answering your question once again, the amount of money that will be spent or have been budgeted may not translate, to how successful the election will be. But I believe INEC needs to do more. Voter education is very, very poor. And the idea of a backing on voter education every 4 years is not what is envisaged, in the Constitution and the Electoral Acts. I would expect that INEC, given that they have an annual budget, should embark on continuous voters education, which makes, participation in electoral process easier. And that is the only thing that can translate to the success of every election or any election.
Thank you, Dr. Chiwuike. One last question, and if you can deliver the answer in 30 seconds. Is on a lighter side, though. Is there a risk that at the time this budget was proposed, the inflationary level was even lower? Because now the naira is almost 800 or whatever to the dollar. So is there a risk that even this amount of money we are talking about, 355 billion, might actually not even be enough, given the rate at which inflation had climbed in the last 3 weeks? If you can do this in 30 seconds, we'd appreciate it.
I'll do it in 1 second. The answer is yes. The exchange rate volatility is on the rise, and you can see how the exchange rate is on the rise, and that will continue until after the election. And also, inflation will also be on the increase until after the election, because we will be spending so much money during the election, and that will put pressure on the currency as well.
Oh, wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chiwuike, for coming on the run-up this morning. It was amazing having this conversation with you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Chiwuike Uba is a financial analyst and he's the convener Amaka Chiwuike Uba Foundation. Beautiful conversation. The inflation is on the rise, and the dollar is about 800 naira now, and I think the pound is 1,000 naira. And then people are screaming. You know, when we hear this monies in naira, it sounds huge, but when you do the exchange, you realize that we almost don't have anything. And then it makes it even more difficult for the regular Nigerian to relate, because then inflation is on the increase. That also means poverty is on the increase. So how many Nigerians are even able to relate to this math that we're here trying to solve, you know, in the studio? But then these are questions you can answer for yourself if you do more research, read up stuff. The run-up will continue in a bit after this short break. Do not go anywhere. Stay with us.